Okay, sorry about that. My camera seems to like to reset at about 30 minutes. So I'm going to go back a sentence here. On page 211, here we are. There is nothing in the history of the universe that equals the blasphemous titles and powers which the popes have assumed. They have openly laid claim to be regarded as Vicar of Christ, the Vicegerent of the Creator, and Governor of the world. And on that claim is built up the tremendous and monstrous fabric, partly civil and partly ecclesiastical, that constitutes the papacy, the beast. Quote, and the world wondered after the beast. This was partly owing to what is stated before, namely that, quote, his deadly wound was healed. The event was so marvelous that it drew the admiration of all that dwelt upon the earth to the beast that was the subject of it. When it was pierced by the sword of the Goths, men thought there was now an end of that terrible kingdom which had shed so much blood and devoured so much flesh. But when they saw it revive in its 10 horns, or kingdoms, occupying the same territory, governed by the same laws as its predecessor, and finding a new bond of union in the papacy, it appeared to them as if Rome had returned from her grave. So completely had the wound been healed. This appeared less than a miracle in the eyes of a blinded world, which accordingly fell down before the beast. They had worshipped the dragon, given unbounded admiration and implicit obedience to every edict of pagan Rome, whether it regarded things civil or things spiritual. It had dictated supremely both law and religion. And when they saw the beast sitting on the same throne and wielding the same power as the dragon, they could render nothing less to the beast than they had given aforetime to the dragon. Quote, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? Unquote. That's from chapter 13, I know that. The religion of papal Rome was but a revival of that pagan Rome under different names. And it became an easy matter to those who dwelt upon the earth to transfer their worship from the one to the other. They who had worshipped demons could do so by whatever name they were called, whether the classic one of Venus or the Christian one of Mary. Quote, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things in blasphemies. Unquote. When the beast found himself on the throne of the dragon, and the world prostrate before him, his heart was lifted up within him, like that of the king of Babylon of old. He imagined himself to be God, and the pride of his heart found vent in the dreadful, blasphemous words of his mouth. He opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. Unquote. No names have been so fearful. I just paused there for a minute because I didn't see a quote here. See, the last quote was up here, quote unquote. Where's the next one? I'm not seeing it. So that was an unquote from, I think it's right here. So it would be right after he imagined himself to be God, and the pride of his heart was found vent in the dreadfully blasphemous words of his mouth. Quote, he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. Now that's Revelation 13 for sure. No names have been so fearfully blasphemous as those which the Pope has assumed. He has claimed dominion over the whole world, and as if this were not enough, he has exalted it into the other. Whom he will, he can consign to hell, and whom he will, he can save from it. The gates of paradise he can lock and unlock. He has issued his order to angels, straightly charging them to do his bidding. Quote, we command the angels of paradise to introduce that soul into heaven, unquote, said Clement VI, of such as might die on their pilgrimage to Rome in the year of Jubilee. He had exercised authority over devils, compelling them to release such as he wished to deliver from flames. Gregory the Great rescued thus the soul of the pagan emperor Trojan. To speak of his setting his throne above that of kings is nothing very remarkable. He has exalted it above that of angels and archangels. He has exalted it above God himself. He has annulled divine ordinances and claimed a power to abrogate the moral law, thus challenging an authority superior to that from which the law emanated. He has sat in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God, quote, to the Romish church, unquote, writes Clement II. Quote, every knee must bow of things on earth, and that at his pleasure even the door of heaven is open and shut, unquote. We find Cardinal Domini writing to Victor II, introducing Christ as speaking, quote, I have appointed thee to be as the father of emperors. I have delivered into thy hands the keys of the whole church universal, and placed thee, my vicar, over her, yea, by the removal of a king, unquote. The emperor of Henry III had just died. Quote, have granted thee the rights of the whole Roman Empire now vacant, unquote. We find Innocent III calling himself the, quote, lieutenant of him who hath written upon his vesture on his thigh, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, unquote. And telling King Richard that, quote, he held the place of God upon earth, and without distinction of persons, he would punish the men of the nations the nations that presumed to oppose his commands, unquote. We find Clement VII affirming in a letter to King Charles VI that, quote, as there is but one God in the heavens, so there cannot nor ought to be of right but one God on earth, unquote. Polynius thus addresses Alexander VI, quote, we rejoice to see you raised above all human things and exalted even to divinity itself, seeing there is nothing except God which is not put under you, unquote. Under the pontifical arms, at the coronation of the Pope, we have just named was inscribed in, the coronation of the Pope, here, let me read that sentence again. I totally butchered that. Under the pontifical arms at the coronation of the Pope, we have just named was inscribed this district. Says, oh, here we go. This is all Latin, and I'm not going to read it, but you can read it right here. But not to multiply proofs, we close with the very extraordinary titles assumed by Martin V. By the way, Latin is the language of the Antichrist, as Alberto Rivera told us in his testimony. And I'm not all that interested in speaking in Latin, just for that reason, okay? So, let's start again here. But not to multiply proofs, we close with the very extraordinary titles assumed by Martin V in the instructions given to a nuncio sent to Constantinople, quote, the most holy and most blessed, who is invested with heavenly power, who is Lord on earth, the successor of Peter, the Christ or anointed of the earth, the Lord of the universe, the Father of kings, the light of the world, the sovereign pontiff, Pope Martin, unquote. Nor are we to suppose that this was a mere empty boast or unallowed claim, like the high-sounding titles which Eastern despots have sometimes assumed. It was ratified by councils, submitted to by kings, and exercised in every spirit exercised in the very spirit in which it was arrogated over the persons, consciences, and lives of all men. There is not a fact in history better established than the literal fulfillment of what is here foretold. Quote, these have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast, unquote. Okay. Quote, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world, unquote. And thus, too, was Paul's prophecy in his epistle to the Thessalonians fulfilled. Quote, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God, unquote. Quote, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, unquote. We have already spoken of this war under the head of the witnesses, and our space does not permit us to reopen the subject. There is not one of the 10 horns which has not, at some period of its history, persecuted the saints, nor is there a spot of Europe within the limits we have formerly traced which has not been sprinkled with their blood. We need only name the murderous crusades carried on for ages against the Waldenses and Albigenses, the slaughter of the Piedmontese, whose bones whitened the Alps, the martyrs of Provence, whose blood tinged so oft the blue waters of the Rhine, the massacres of St. Bartholomew, when in Paris alone 30,000 Protestants perished, and the intelligence of which was received at Rome with the ringing of bells and the firing of cannon, the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, when many thousand Protestant churches were razed to the ground, that means destroyed to the ground, and hundreds of thousands of Protestants were put to the sword or driven into banishment. The bloody wars of Alva in the Low Countries, the suppression of the Reformation in Spain and Italy by the terrors of the axe, the faggot, and the horrors of the Inquisition, besides the countless thousands who perished at other times and in other parts of Europe by the hands of popery, and of whom no record has been kept, and whose names shall never be known till the books are opened. He's speaking of the book of life at the judgment of the world when Christ returns here. Engraven on the page of history stands the record of her crimes. She shall perish, but it is eternal. To the end of time, not a line of the crimson writing shall be effaced. And so long as it continues to be read, it will excite the mingled horror and indignation of mankind. But the most marvelous thing in the prophecy is that the beast should overcome in the war, i.e., the first instance. For in the final issue, the Lamb should overcome. Let us here mark the adorable sovereignty of God. This power to make war and to overcome in the war was given unto the beast. Quote, "Thou couldst have no power at all against me," unquote, Christ said, when standing before Pilate to be judged. Quote, "Had it not been given thee from above," unquote. The beast, in the plenitude of his pride and power, thought that he might do according to his will without having respect to any god or man, saying, "No doubt, with the king of old, who is he that can deliver out of mine hand?" The beast was mistaken herein. He could not have split a drop. He could not have split a drop of the church's blood. Oh, would that be spilt? I'm sorry, let me read that again. The beast was mistaken herein. He could not have spilt a drop of the church's blood, nor touched a hair of her head, had he not received power from above. But why did God permit his fold so long to be a field of slaughter? Why did the church's blood continue to flow and her groans to ascend to heaven, while he stood by as one who either would not or could not deliver? We know not. But this we know, that it was God who did it, and that he had wise purposes for doing it, and that he will yet bring good out of all of it, and glorify both himself and the church by the course of suffering through which he has led her. Okay, that ends the chapter. We will continue next time with the two-horned beast of the earth. Catch you back then. God bless. Take good care. Bye-bye.